Chapter 1: The Rescue. The night was suffocatingly still, as if the world itself held its breath for what was about to unfold. Elena gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white under the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Her phone sat on the passenger seat, screen dark, but the frantic voice message from her sister Clara echoed in her mind. "Elena, please. I can't take it anymore. I need to get out, but I'm scared. He'll kill me if he finds out." Clara's voice had cracked, each word dripping with desperation. That was all Elena needed to hear to set her plan in motion. She pulled up a block away from the modest suburban house where Clara lived, or rather, where she was imprisoned. The street was eerily quiet, the occasional bark of a distant dog the only sound. Victor's car wasn't in the driveway. Good. Elena checked her watch. They'd planned this carefully. Clara would signal once Victor left for his usual late-night outing, and they'd have minutes, maybe seconds, before he could realize she was gone. Her phone vibrated. A text from Clara. "He's gone. Front door unlocked." Elena slipped out of the car, her heart hammering against her ribs. She approached the house with light, measured steps. The porch creaked under her weight, and she froze, listening for any sound within. Nothing. Pushing the door open, she stepped into the dimly lit living room. The air inside was thick, oppressive, carrying the faint scent of cigarette smoke and stale beer. Clara stood at the base of the staircase, a small duffel bag clutched in her trembling hands. Her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously to every shadow. "Elena," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let's go," Elena said, taking her sister's hand. They moved quickly, slipping out into the night. As they reached Elena's car, Clara hesitated, looking back toward the house. "What if he finds us?" Clara's voice was barely audible. "He won't," Elena said firmly, though she wasn't entirely sure. "I won't let him." The engine roared to life, and they sped away into the darkness. For a moment, relief washed over Elena. They were free, or so she thought. The headlights appeared in the rearview mirror less than 20 minutes later. At first, Elena thought it was just another car on the road, but when it sped up, tailing them closely, a chill ran down her spine. "Elena," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "That's him." Adrenaline surged through Elena as she gritted her teeth and pressed harder on the gas. The car behind them matched her pace, its headlights glaring. "He wasn't supposed to be home yet," Clara said, panic rising in her voice. "It doesn't matter," Elena said, her focus razor sharp. "Hold on." Elena made a sharp turn onto a narrow side street, her tires screeching. The pursuing car hesitated, and for a moment she thought they'd lost him. But then the headlights reappeared, closer this time. "We're not going to outrun him," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. Elena's mind raced. She spotted a small diner up ahead with a well-lit parking lot. Without hesitation, she pulled in, skidding to a stop near the entrance. "Get inside," Elena commanded, her voice firm. "What about you?" "Go, Clara?" Clara bolted from the car, running into the diner as Elena stepped out to confront the approaching vehicle. Victor's car screeched to a halt, and he stepped out, his imposing figure illuminated by the harsh parking lot lights. "Elena," he said, his voice low and menacing, "you think you can take her from me?" Elena squared her shoulders, refusing to show fear. "She's not yours to keep." Victor's lips twisted into a sneer. "You have no idea what you've just started." Chapter 2: The Fallout. The morning after their escape, Elena sat at her kitchen table, nursing a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The events of the previous night played over and over in her mind. Clara was safe for now, but the shadow of Victor loomed larger than ever. In the guest room down the hall, Clara slept fitfully, her face still pale and drawn. She hadn't spoken much since they returned to Elena's apartment, her fear so palpable it hung in the air like a storm cloud. Elena's phone buzzed, jolting her out of her thoughts. The unknown number on the screen made her stomach churn. She hesitated before answering. "Elena." The voice was unmistakable. Victor. Her grip on the phone tightened. "How did you get this number?" "You think you've won, don't you?" His tone was calm, almost mocking. "Dragging her out in the middle of the night like some cheap hero? Let me tell you something. You can't protect her forever." Elena's pulse quickened, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "She's done with you, Victor. Stay away from her. And stay away from me." Victor chuckled darkly. "You've made this personal, Elena. I'm just getting started." The line went dead, and Elena stared at the phone, her hands trembling. Elena doubled her efforts to shield Clara. She reached out to a friend in another city, arranging for Clara to stay with her for a while. The plan was to keep Clara off Victor's radar while Elena dealt with the fallout. But Victor wasn't easily deterred. Over the next few days, small, unsettling signs of his presence began to appear. Elena returned home one evening to find her front door unlocked, though Clara swore she hadn't touched it. Another time, she discovered a single cigarette butt on her doorstep, Victor's brand. The final straw came when she found a note slipped under her windshield wiper. "You should have stayed out of it." Elena showed the note to Clara, whose face went white. "He's not going to stop," Clara whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "He'll stop," Elena said, her jaw set. "I'll make sure of it." Clara's fear wasn't the only battle Elena had to fight. Her sister was a shadow of her former self, flinching at every unexpected sound and doubting her own worth. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Clara broke down. "Maybe I should go back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena stared at her, horrified. "What are you talking about? Clara, he'll kill you." Clara buried her face in her hands. "At least he won't hurt anyone else. You're in danger because of me. This is my fault." Elena knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. None of this is your fault. He's the one who's wrong. You deserve to be free, Clara. We both do." Clara nodded weakly, but the guilt in her eyes didn't fade. Later that week, Elena returned home to find a package waiting on her doorstep. It was unmarked, and as she opened it, her stomach twisted. Inside was a single photograph of her and Clara from years ago, taken at a family barbecue. The edges were charred, as if someone had deliberately burned them. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was a picture of her standing in the diner parking lot the night she confronted Victor, followed by a single word, "Soon." Elena's blood ran cold. Victor wasn't just targeting Clara, he was coming for her too. Chapter 3. The Family Secret. The air in the small apartment felt heavy, a reflection of the weight both sisters carried. Elena sat at the dining table, papers and photographs spread out before her like a jigsaw puzzle missing its most critical pieces. Across from her, Clara watched in silence, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. Elena tapped a finger on one of the photos, a faded image of their family from years ago. Their father, Mark, stood at the center, his arm around their mother, his smile wide and easy. It was the last photo taken before he walked out of their lives. "Victor mentioned him," Elena said, breaking the silence. "That night at the diner. He said something about me having no idea what I'd started. And then there's this." She gestured to the burned photograph Victor had left on her doorstep. Clara frowned. "You think Victor knew Dad?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "But it's too much of a coincidence. There's something he's not telling us, something about Dad." Clara hesitated, her expression troubled. "There was one time," she said slowly. "Victor was drunk. He said something strange. He called me a pawn in a bigger game. I thought he was just ranting, but maybe he meant it." Elena's gut tightened. A bigger game? What could he mean? Determined to find answers, Elena began digging into their father's history. It wasn't easy. He had disappeared nearly 20 years ago, leaving behind only debts and broken promises. She spent hours combing through old records, newspaper clippings, and online searches. Finally, she found something, a name that kept appearing alongside their father's in several legal documents. Victor Blackwell. Elena's breath caught. Blackwell wasn't a common surname. Could it really be the same Victor? She dug deeper and uncovered a lawsuit from 2 decades ago. Their father, Mark, had been sued for fraud by a man named Joseph Blackwell, Victor's father. According to the documents, Mark had embezzled money from Joseph's company, destroying the Blackwell family's finances. The case had ended with Mark disappearing and Joseph losing everything. Victor's obsession suddenly made horrifying sense. Elena shared her discovery with Clara that evening. "Victor blames Dad for everything," she explained. "The lawsuit, the bankruptcy. He thinks our family ruined his." Clara paled. "But that wasn't our fault. We were just kids. How could he hold that against us?" Elena shook her head. "It doesn't matter to him. This isn't just about you leaving him, Clara. This is about revenge. He sees us as part of the same family that destroyed his." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I never knew. Victor never talked about his past, not like this." Elena's phone buzzed again, pulling her attention away. She hesitated before picking it up. The text was from an unknown number. It was a photograph of her father's face scrawled over with red ink. "He started this. You'll end it." Elena decided to confront their mother, who had always been tight-lipped about Mark's departure. She and Clara drove to the small retirement community where their mother lived, the tension between them unspoken but thick. When they arrived, their mother seemed genuinely surprised to see them. But when Elena brought up Mark's connection to Victor, her face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about," their mother said, her voice clipped. "Mom, don't lie to us," Elena pressed. "Victor's father sued Dad. He blames us for what happened to his family. Did you know about this?" Their mother hesitated, then sighed heavily. "I didn't think it mattered anymore," she admitted. "Your father made some poor choices. He was desperate for money, and he thought Joseph Blackwell wouldn't notice. When he got caught, he promised to fix it, but instead he ran. I thought we could move on." "Move on?" Clara's voice cracked. "Victor is trying to destroy us because of what Dad did. You should have told us." "I didn't think it would come back to haunt us," their mother said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know Victor would." She stopped herself. "Would what?" Elena demanded. Their mother looked down to have guilt etched into her face. "I didn't know Victor would marry into this family just to get his revenge." The room fell silent. Elena and Clara left their mother's house in a daze. The pieces were finally falling into place. Victor's marriage to Clara had never been about love. It had been a calculated move to get close to their family, to punish them for the sins of their father. But Elena knew one thing for certain: Victor's plan wasn't over. Chapter 4: The Obsession Grows. The air in Elena's apartment was thick with unease. Clara had retreated to the guest room, her nerves too frayed to engage in more conversations about Victor or their father. Elena sat alone in the living room, scrolling through her phone, her mind racing with every possible way to end this nightmare. She had tried to push through her fear, but Victor's presence seemed to grow stronger by the day. It wasn't just the cryptic texts or the eerie reminders of his closeness. It was the way he always seemed to be one step ahead. The buzz of her phone shattered the silence. It was a text from another unknown number. "Miss me, Elena? You're next." Elena's chest tightened. She locked her doors and windows every night, but her home still felt like a glass box, fragile and exposed. She knew Victor wanted her to feel this way. Over the next few days, Victor's methods became bolder. Elena started receiving calls at all hours of the night, the lines silent except for the faint sound of breathing. A package arrived at her doorstep containing an old photograph of Clara as a child, ripped in half. Elena's car tires were slashed one morning, a clear warning that he could reach her whenever he wanted. She called the police, but their response was frustratingly measured. Without clear proof that Victor had committed these acts, they could do little more than file a report. "Until he does something concrete, our hands are tied," the officer said apologetically. Elena's frustration boiled over. "So what? I just sit here and wait for him to make his move?" The officer's silence said it all. Determined not to let Victor win, Elena reached out to a private investigator, Detective Harris, whose reputation for dealing with stalking cases was well known. Harris was a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor and a calm, steady gaze. He listened intently as Elena laid out everything: Victor's history, the texts, the packages, and the connection to her father. "He's playing a psychological game," Harris said when she finished. "He wants you to feel powerless, isolated. The key is not to let him see you crack." "Easier said than done," Elena muttered. Harris nodded. "I'll do some digging on my end. In the meantime, stay vigilant, keep documenting everything, and don't engage with him directly. He's feeding off your fear." While Elena worked with Harris, Clara continued to spiral. One evening, as they sat on the couch in tense silence, Clara finally broke down. "This is all my fault," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I should have seen what Victor was planning. I should have stopped him before it got this far." Elena turned to her sister, her own frustration melting into compassion. "Clara, listen to me. You didn't cause this. Victor did. He manipulated you, just like he's trying to manipulate me now. None of this is your fault." Clara shook her head. "But he's doing all of this because of me. I brought him into our lives. You didn't know who he really was," Elena said firmly. "And now that we do, we're going to stop him. Together." Despite Harris's reassurances, Victor's presence continued to escalate. Late one night, Elena was startled awake by the sound of shattering glass. She bolted out of bed, grabbing the baseball bat she kept by her nightstand, and crept into the living room. Her front window was smashed, and lying on the floor amid the shards of glass was another photograph. this time of Elena herself. Written across it in red marker were the words, "Time's up." The police arrived within minutes, but Victor was long gone. As they dusted for fingerprints, Harris pulled Elena aside. "This is more than just a game now," he said grimly. "He's making it clear he's willing to cross the line." Elena's stomach churned. "What do I do?" Harris's expression hardened. "You fight back. We're going to bait him, Elena. It's risky, but it might be the only way to stop him before he does something worse." Elena spent the next day preparing for Harris's plan. They would stage a meeting between her and Clara at a public park, knowing Victor wouldn't be able to resist showing up. Harris and a small team would be nearby, ready to intervene. Clara was hesitant about the idea. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elena squeezed her sister's hand. "We don't have a choice. This is the only way to end it."